Now it's started officially. Welcome. I'm Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine, and it's an honor and pleasure to have such a large audience joining us today for a very, very important topic in the news media industry today, which is building a better newsletter model through efficiency and making it as profitable as you can. Once again, this is an EMP sponsored webinar, and we're very, very happy to have one of our supporters of our mission at ENP, of course, to support the news media industry, Letterhead. And we're also honored to have one of its founders with us. Chris, most probably going to mispronounce your name. Yesterday when we had our prep talk, it's Stouffer, correct?
No T.
What?
No T. It's Chris Stouffer. It's nice to meet y'all.
Chris Stouffer. Okay, great. Okay, excellent. And Chris, thank you again so much for supporting the mission of ENP Magazine. And I want to also welcome from the Pacific Northwest. Her official name is Danielle Hastings, but Danny, you like D-A-N-I, not D-A-N-N-Y. Do we have that correct?
That is correct. I go by D-A-N-I.
The reason Danny's on board is she is a user of the Letterhead product. We always like to turn these sponsored webinars into more of a case study. So first, let's get through the housekeeping. Then we're going to swing it to Danny we'll swing it to Chris and then Danny in a few seconds. But we are on Zoom, duh. One of the things we'd like to do is keep our eye on the chat room. Now, when you go to chat on Zoom for some reason, it defaults to send to host and panelists only. We urge you to send your comments, questions, suggestions, whatever you got, to everyone. I'd like to see a dialogue going on there. If there are questions you need answered, pop it in there. If you have your own thoughts on the topics we're discussing, pop it in there. Let's make this a lively dialogue in the chat room, please. So let's get started. First of all, I'd like to introduce Chris. Chris, I think this is a chance to describe to us why the heck you formed this company. And I actually, Chris, I hope you don't mind, I stalked you a little bit. You founded another company before this, whereby.us. So you were building up these like kind of local communities online, but you got a little ink in your veins, or at least news in your vein, 4 years at the Knight Foundation. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, you started as a multimedia editor in 2006 at the Daily Tar Heel in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Is that correct, sir?
That's true.
Amazing. Now you're the founder of a company called Letterhead, a well-respected provider of solutions for the news media industry. Chris, do me a favor. What the heck is Letterhead? Treat me like I'm a 3-year-old. And what problems does it solve for news publishers today, sir?
It's pretty simple. Letterhead is a kind of end-to-end execution system for newsletters built for the news publishing media content industry. So we help companies do everything from email strategy to building and designing and sending their newsletters, metrics collection, audience management, and monetization as well. And our software kind of runs the gamut between every step of the email process, and then our team comes along behind that and supports teams in leveling up their newsletter strategy and aiming for better open rates, better ROI, and increased revenue from email.
As a news media consultant for over 25 years, you got to understand, I'm an old guy, Chris. Chris, I started off in 1998 putting one of the first newspapers on the internet. The Newspaper Association of America nominated me as a digital pioneer. That's how old I am. And we're talking pre-Google, way back in the dark ages. But I used to scream at newspaper publishers, and I had hundreds on my consultancy business. They weren't taking email seriously enough, which I still find fascinating today. And if I might tell you a quick story, when I took over E&P 6 years ago, its email database was only 5,000. I ignored content first. I let the existing people I inherited run their office in California, and I spent an entire year building that database to over 35,000 on a scale of 1 to 10, and I hope you answer what I'm thinking. How important is having that email that as your link to your readership, in your opinion, in the news publishing industry?
Well, obviously we have a horse in that particular race, but we think the answer is very, very important. It's of course the industry is very cyclical in some respects, but one thing that is always true in our view is that the first party kind of audience, owning your direct relationship with the people who read your content, who are part of that community, who value the work that you do, that's, paramount importance right now for, for every publisher, for every type of organization. And obviously we've been through eras where there was a lot of reliance on search, on social media, on video, on all kinds of third party platforms and products. And those absolutely have their place, right? There's no question about that. But what we like to see, and big part of our mission, is how do we help publishers really shore up and strengthen that first party audience relationship with their email subscribers as kind of a core currency of the business.
I gotta say, when when it comes to revenue, I consider email one of my most important drivers of revenue for E&P. I mean, we have over 140 people who registered for this webinar, and I believe I did most of that through email. When I launch a new vertical, I do most of that through email. When I have a new product or service or branded item, I am finding it's one of the best ways and my number one revenue stream is monetizing my email. I'm sorry, I find it fascinating how when I look at media companies, they don't seem to make that this a priority. They're so busy worrying about the landing page that they're not worrying as much. So let's get to the word smarter. One of the things you say all over your website, smarter. And of course, you talk about scalability and automation, excuse me. But how important is monetization, and how much can you advise people to making a buck out of this platform, and how important is that to you, sir?
Yeah, I mean, we think it's absolutely critical. Although, one thing I would say is that it's not just about direct ad revenue, in the newsletter. That's an important element of it for sure. But it's exactly what you're talking about, Mike, where email is connected to that kind of ecosystem of everything else that you're doing, right? You're using email to launch these products and so forth, but it's not just because you have an email that works, right? It's because you have a relationship with the folks who read E&P, and they understand what the brand is about, and email is a way to show up, in our view, in a more personal way with those subscribers, right? It's a way to show up and say, hey, I'm here with high quality content, I'm delivering on our mission. And it's actually a very personal medium in our view. Like we actually coach a lot of the publishers we work with to think about their newsletters like they're showing up at somebody's house, or like showing up in person. It's kind of intimate to be in the inbox. And it's going to become even more like that as we get into this moment when, Gmail and Yahoo and these other providers are really pushing to make it harder for unwanted email to show up on your radar and land in that primary inbox. You want to be on the right side of that. And that means that treating it almost like it's a personal email is really important. And, what are the things that get you to show up in that context? So I think it's, what we see is that every publisher we talk to understands the importance of the channel, but it's just a lot harder than it needs to be historically. And part of that's a software problem, and part of that's just like a technology complexity thing to really execute and do this channel well. And so, how do you close that gap? I mean, that's really what we're focused on, as a business, because, we do really believe in that, the importance of that first party data, and, the criticality of sort of centralizing that audience ownership. But a big part of what we talk about with folks is that, it is a lot harder than it should be, because of some of these obstacles that come in the way.
It One of the things I love about your platform is you take away the work. I mean, you let the news people do what they do best, which is come up with the stories and the headlines and what resonates with their community. But then you find a very simple, easy system that just makes it all seamless, right? The emails just get created, and you're not just doing this without knowledge of you're improving how it gets displayed. Am I correct, sir?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are kind of four things that we're focused on, right? The core four things that we try to solve are the kind of insights and strategy layer. So what to do and when, how to master and maximize the channel. Like what we see is that there's so many best practices, and you should do this and try this for your newsletter, and here's how important email is. There's a lot of that information flying at every publisher, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call. And the tricky part is that the right answer for each newsletter and each product in your network and each individual publisher is going to be different each time. We have customers with 5 newsletters, with 100 newsletters. I think our largest customer has about 900 different newsletter products that they send on our software. And the reality is each one of those products is a product, and that means that it needs different things at different points in time. They're not all created equal, right? But it's historically very difficult to treat them that way because you have to kind of fight the software and the data to have that product driven strategy. And so that's a big part of it for us. The content workflows piece is a huge element. How do we reduce the time it takes to make high quality newsletters? How do we help people get better data about their engagement, keep their deliverability strong, manage all of the technical underpinnings in email? There's 400 different acronyms related to email technology that our view is like publishers shouldn't have to become experts at that. Like that's our job. How do we facilitate that? And then how do we leverage all of this work in the channel to drive revenue, right? Whether that's directly through advertising and sponsorship or indirectly through calls to action, signups, membership and donation campaigns and other kinds of ways that you can convert that engagement into dollars. But ultimately our whole thing is how do we close that execution gap where you hear a lot that email should be this super high value channel, but in practice there's all these things kind of standing in the way that make it much higher friction than it really should be. And so that's kind of why we built Letterhead. The idea is that we're creating this end-to-end execution system for publishers that integrates with your existing software, helps you automate as much of the process as you want. Some customers are very hands-off with us, and others are very hands-on designing every single newsletter. There's a lot of flexibility there, and really focused on kind of the needs of the publishing industry in particular. And the way we work and the kind of position that we take is we want to be the partner, the strategic partner for our customers. And we want them to feel like they're getting a newsletter team, a newsletter expertise, a newsletter consultant for that software subscription that, is very similar to what they would be paying on a more traditional piece of email software. So we're trying to pack a lot more value for this industry, into that kind of software proposition by saying, hey, we want to be your partner to take and scale this channel in a much bigger way.
I got to say, we had, as I said, over 140 sign up for this, and we always ask a question. We make the sign up for name, address, just name and email and all that, but what are you trying to learn? And half of the questions were things like, I don't know how many I should send. I don't know when I should send them. I don't know what is good versus bad on a subject line. How do I get better open? The basic questions we all ask. Chris, I'm assuming with all the customers you have and the thousands, if not millions of emails you send, you're looking at these metrics and you can give real world advice to your media group clients. Am I right, sir?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big part of our kind of support and customer experience part is we actually work with a lot of folks to help them through some of those strategic decisions. And we've recently expanded that team really significantly, actually, to be able to invest even more in that kind of strategic element that we do, with the software. And the goal there is really, again, like each newsletter is a product. How do we help you treat it like a product, right? That's kind of the thing that we care about. And so we've got parts of the software that are connected to each one of those core pain points. But the one that we start with is this kind of control center where you can manage multiple different newsletters, and each one has its own workspace, its own data, its own team and permissions, all of these things. And within each one, there's content automation, there's engagement optimization, and there's what we call promotions, which is all about the revenue side. And so I'm sure, in the rest of this conversation, we'll talk a lot more about, content workflows and engagement data and deliverability and driving revenue and all the specifics under that. But our view is like all of those things really come together, and you kind of got to nail all sides of that shape in order to get the right ROI. And that's where the difficulty comes from. So, how do we close that gap? And the last thing in the slides, so we can move on to the good stuff, is we work with a wide range of folks across different sizes and scales, right? Global Post is a long-term partner of ours that does world news, international news. They work with more than 130 different publication partners and audiences across across their network. And their newsletter is actually fully automated through our system because they put a ton of energy into building out all of the content, in a different system. So they don't write and design their newsletter in Letterhead. Their editorial team makes a really amazing product. You should go sign up. I read it every day. It's awesome. And then our system is really about facilitating the automation, distribution, delivery, monetization of that product, right? We also work with folks like a Town Square, where they've got 800 plus channels, millions of subscribers, and they're working across, a very broad set of different markets, each of which has different needs. Some of them are fully automated, some of them are hyper personalized, some of them are very bespoke and curated. And you've really got to power a kind of broad set of use cases under one umbrella to do something like that. And we also work with a lot of folks who are more in the marketing, creative, and agency space as well, who are working with other types of brands that are trying to leverage email to drive that engagement. So there's sort of a wide range of audiences there, but obviously, as we're about to talk about, InfoNews is a mission that we think is really cool, and a lot of what we do is around supporting local journalism and kind of higher quality information environment. And just to tie it all together, we think email is a really critical part of that ecosystem and of allowing companies to have that kind of durability, as the market changes.
Well, with that being said, let me take you to one of the most highly populated, huge metropolitan areas in the world. Let me take you to where Danny is from. Danny, I got a map on the screen. Do you see that puppy there?
I do.
Do I have the right area kind of circled for where you're located? And I had a little, I've been to that part of the world, but I'll be honest with you, I'm scared of heights. This is one of the few people know, scared of ledges. And I was close to you when I had to consult in Whistler and I had to do the Sea to Sky Highway. I was going
Yes.
5 miles an hour with trucks behind beeping at me. That's a hard ride for me. You're in some of the most beautiful places in the world, correct? Describe your environment first. Where are you located and what is this place like in Canada?
So I'm actually in Vernon, BC today as we're doing this webinar. We are located in the Okanagan. We're surrounded by three beautiful lakes, gorgeous mountains, endless wineries, orchards. We've got ski hills, we've got golf courses, we've got it all.
What is your company, Infotel? How large are you? You're operations manager, correct? What does that
Yeah.
mean? What do you do? How big is your team? And how big is your audience? Just give me the elevator pitch on who you are every time someone asks what your company is.
Well, I'm going to just take a little bit of a different approach to that. So I joined the company in 2014, and InfoNews was already established as a digital news outlet at that time under our parent company, Infotel Multimedia. So Infotel Multimedia carried a strong legacy as a print directory, and it has had that foundation since the late 1980s. Over the past 11 years, it's been a incredible transition, shifting from those print roots into a full-scale media agency. And today we offer a wide range of digital services, including website development, social media management, pay-per-click advertising, digital banners, lots more. But again, today we're here to focus on info news and more specifically how we're using Letterhead for our newsletters to connect with our readers and support our business model.
You got a lot of dues. I mean, you're hyper local. I can pick different regions when I go to your
Yeah.
sites. How much big is your newsroom? I mean, how many people are generating this news for your operation, if I may ask?
So we have our editor, our assistant editor, and I'll touch more on them here in a moment. And then currently, I believe we have six reporters, but we're in the process of hiring.
Your sales effort is very advanced I mean, I hope you don't mind. I took a look at you've got a full suite of digital services too, correct? So
Yes, we do.
you're not just pushing banner ads on your website or email marketing. You're
No.
managing websites, social media, you're selling directory services, all that and more. So a very advanced team. The training must be huge for your sales reps and making sure they understand the needs of your
Yeah,
advertisement.
yeah, it's quite comprehensive. So they do a week of virtual training with different members of our management team. And then they also have a week in the field with their district sales manager learning the ropes. So it is quite comprehensive.
So your operations manager, what does that entail? You're in charge of making sure everything just runs smoothly, if I may ask. What makes you a hero to your boss?
Well, that's a great question. I was speaking with my boss yesterday, and basically, I do a little bit of everything or a lot of everything, depending on how you want to look at it. So we have, obviously our news team, which is the focus of today. We refer to our digital team as our web department. We have our administration team, our sales team, our management team, the accounting department, and I am involved with all of them and working to streamline our operations, making sure all the different departments are in communication, making sure our customers are looked after. I love my job and it's a great place to work.
So let's get into email. What was your world like before you reached out to Letterhead? How were you managing your newsletters, and how important were they to your operation, if I may ask?
Well, great question. So before we started using Letterhead, we were managing our newsletters entirely in-house. We had built our own system, and while it technically worked, it was manual and quite time-consuming and pretty much a very clunky system. Everything from copy and image input to scheduling, formatting required hands-on attention, and there really wasn't much room for flexibility or customization, which made scaling quite difficult. Increasing the frequency of our newsletters, testing layout changes, or tailoring content for different audiences felt like a major undertaking each time, and that really limited everything that we could do. Another major challenge was monetization. We were already selling banner ads in our newsletters, but the process was still quite manual, coordinating with the advertisers, managing the placements, inserting the creative assets. It all took more time and back and forth than it really should have. And while we were generating some revenue, the reality was there was not a seamless connection between sales and our content delivery. That made it really hard to scale and fully capitalize on that opportunity. So while there's definitely still room for improvement within the monetization side of things, we're in a much better place than we were before. And then I'm just going to touch on Bill C-18, the Online News Act. And some of you might not be familiar with this bill. It's a Canadian law that was passed in 2023 requiring tech platforms like Meta and Google to compensate Canadian news organizations whenever their content is shared or linked on their platforms. The goal was to support Canadian journalism by ensuring big tech companies paid for news and content that helps drive traffic to their platforms. But in response to this bill, Meta chose to block news content from being viewed or shared on Facebook and Instagram in Canada. They argued that the law is based on a flawed understanding of how news is shared online and that it unfairly punishes their platform for enabling free traffic to the news outlets. Google, however, they did reach a agreement with the Canadian government to contribute to support Canadian news. Unfortunately, Meta has held its position and it continues to this day to block news in Canada. But bringing that back to us, although we were already exploring ways to reduce our reliance on social media channels, the impact of Bill C-18 and for us and many other Canadian news publishers was immediate. So once Meta began blocking news content, we saw a noticeable drop in our traffic, our reader engagement from platforms like Facebook and Instagram. So it was really a big wake-up call. We could no longer rely on our social media as a guaranteed distribution channel, and that really forced us to double down on building a direct connection with our readers. And our newsletters became the cornerstone of that whole strategy. So basically, we were at a point where our internal system was maxed out, our ad revenue wasn't being fully captured,
There you go.
and the external landscape had shifted dramatically. And that's where Letterhead entered the chat.
It's amazing. We reported heavily on what happened in Canada and how Facebook did that. And there was a battle. We had Paul Deegan on my podcast discussing that, head of News Media Canada. And it was just fascinating how you guys had to regroup instantly in order to maintain an audience and and the critical dollars to be sustainable. And so bravo, and looking at the newsletter as a primary focus, Danny. So let's talk about it. So now you bring in Letterhead, the efficiency starts, am I right? You start to be able to get rid of as if I may use Chris's term, the friction, and focus mostly on the content that you had. How was that? How was the transition? Was it awful? Did it take months? Did you have to rebuild your entire content management system? I'm setting you up. I mean, how easy was it to make this transformation, Danny?
It was very easy. Once we got up and running with Letterhead, the difference was honestly night and day. From an operations perspective, the biggest game changer was how much time we saved. Letterhead took a lot of the manual friction out of the process. Formatting became automated, scheduling was really easy, adding or changing content was no longer a huge ordeal. We were able to standardize our workflow, which meant more consistency, fewer errors. Now we can publish more frequently, we can test different formats and respond to current events or advertiser needs quite quickly. We don't have to rebuild the wheel each time an issue comes up. It also gave us flexibility. We can run multiple versions of our newsletters across different markets and actually tailor content to each region. And that just wasn't possible before without creating a ton of work.
Subscriber database is large, I assume, and keeps growing. I mean, how may I ask numbers if you don't mind sharing?
I
How large is your combined newsletter database, subscriber database? Am I allowed to ask?
You are allowed to ask. I didn't actually look before I got on the call. I believe it's over 10,000, but the exact number I can't tell you right on this. I can definitely follow up with that. It's something that we're working on and we're growing. And I know that may sound small to some organizations, but
No,
um,
I don't think it does sound small to some organizations. I think some organizations on this webinar would kill for 10,000. Especially you're not huge markets, right? This is not a
no.
you're not
So
Vancouver.
No, we have about 650,000 year-round residents in the Thompson Okanagan, and then we also cater to 3.5 million tourists annually coming for all that we offer that we touched on before, that golf ski lifestyle.
All right, I want to please urge the audience to chat. We're getting a lot of chat, but some people are sending it just to the host and panelists. Everyone, just right now, questions, concerns. If we're not hitting the right topics, get into the chat and challenge the group and ask the audience questions too, or make a statement if you wish. Let's get both of you guys into the conversation now, Chris and Danny. Okay, so let me start with you, Chris. With your years of experience, understanding of this platform, watching the metrics daily or hourly or by the second, what is the one thing you should take? If you got news publishers who are going to be watching this recording, people who are responsible for building a sustainable news operation, what should news publishers stop doing with newsletters, in your humble opinion, sir?
Well, I actually think there's one that's related exactly to what Danny was just saying, and the Info News team I think does a phenomenal job at this, and if you're not already on their site, you should go check it out. But it is playing to the power of that niche and focus, right? And thinking, kind of inverting, like Bruce Martinez is saying in the chat, inverting the way you think about selling that audience for the purpose of sponsorships or even internally, right? That if you're in a local market, well, how big is that market? That kind of thing. But also, as Bruce is saying, like, if you've got 10,000 people reading something every day, that's more people than fit in pretty much any music or sports venue in a lot of communities, right? And so the amount of attention share that you actually have is really powerful. And again, email is a very intimate, medium when people are actually reading it because it's mixed in there with emails from friends and coworkers and that kind of thing. And so if you're getting that share, we encourage people to think about it like a much more personal relationship and more like an audience building, community development kind of initiative, and less like a volume game, right? It's not just pure play about getting the biggest number, but it's really easy to pull that kind of web traffic driven, social media driven thinking that we just need the biggest number we can get. It's easy to pull that over to email and kind of import it into the email channel as a way of thinking. And of course, we want our audiences to grow, but there's a lot of power in really understanding who those people are and what the product is we're delivering and being like hyper committed to that. And then every incremental subscriber you add is worth a lot more than when you're just chasing the biggest number. And we see publishers doing that in a really, really smart way, just like the Info News team is. And I also have been on the other side of that, where with our media company, we had a lot more success doubling down on that strategy than on just trying to chase the biggest possible number. So that's definitely one that I would start with. The other big one I would say is just really bringing that product thinking to the newsletter, right? it is an editorial product. It's an audience development product. It's not just a distribution channel, you know. It has a role to play where you have to think about what type of newsletter is this? When am I delivering it? What are people doing in their lives when they are reading it? Are they on their way to work? Did they just roll over in bed and pick up their phone? Are they, getting a coffee? Are they, in between meetings? Like thinking about the context is really important. And then what are you delivering? Is it top headlines? Is it an interesting essay? Is it a recap of the week? These are different things, but they're all different products. And so you have to kind of go into it that way. We see a lot that organizations will treat it sort of like it becomes this Christmas tree where people are like hanging all these different things on it. And very quickly in the organization, you have like one newsletter or whatever that is trying to do everything. It's trying to engage subscribers, get more members, get people to click on something and go to the website, get somebody to watch a video, get an advertiser. It's very difficult for one product to do all of those things. So starting
Exactly.
with product strategy is so critical.
And Danny, you got three hyperlocal ones, right? You're just like, no, five. How many newsletters are you managing now, Danny, through
Four.
Letterhead? Four. D- Before you were able to automate the system, you must have had some pushback, right? Like some friction. I got enough to do in the newsroom, right? I mean, does this help?
Oh, for sure. The For us, it's been great using Letterhead. It's really standardized our workflow. It's automated a lot of the busy work. We used to spend a lot of time formatting, inserting ads, checking links, tweaking layouts. And you just can't scale that when you're managing multiple markets. But now with the templates that we've built with Letterhead, we have the flexibility to tailor our content without redoing the whole newsletter each time. So we don't have to start from scratch. Definitely reduce the back and forth. There's fewer bottlenecks, a lot less stress on everyone involved. And our newsletters have definitely become the cornerstone of our strategy. They allowed us to reach our readers directly in their inboxes with those stories that matter, especially as social media platforms become less reliable. And I don't want to scratch Chris's back too much, but best of all, Letterhead is a really affordable solution. And what really sets it apart is the support that their team comes with. From day one, their onboarding process is super clear. It's very structured, incredibly helpful. You're definitely not left to figure it out on your own. Their account and tech support teams are very responsive, knowledgeable, and they're invested in your success, which is super important. So whether you got a quick question or it's a deeper strategic conversation, they're there to help you along the way. And when you're making that switch, you're not just adopting that new platform, you're gaining a partner that definitely has your back and is committed to helping your newsletters thrive.
Chris, you better pay her for that. There was your pull quote there. Just grab some of that and put it on social media. And if anyone doubts that Danny is Canadian, she did say the word process. So I want you to know we now know. Danny, you gave it away. Chris, let's talk about, there's some dialogue going on in chat I got to talk about. The word subscriptions. Danny, you're wide open, right? No hard paywall. Your content, you just monetize the audience you capture. You know that many of the people attending this webinar, and they'll be watching the recording subsequently, are going for reader revenue with hard paywalls, soft paywalls, hybrid models. Chris, I already know the answer to this. How important is doing an effective newsletter in building those subs and, most importantly, retaining them? Chris, take it away. This is a very hot topic right now, and we've done
Yeah.
a lot of reporting on this recently.
I mean, I think this goes directly to the product strategy piece, right? Where what we one of the things we see people doing a lot of is here's a newsletter that's open for kind of anybody on the list. Here's a newsletter that is paid and only for subscribers. Or here's our newsletter, but there's an extra section or special content that's only for paying members. So we think it's a really valuable thing for that. That's super common. Of course, it's really important to think about what is that strategy that you want to do. And, sometimes in smaller organizations where team capacity is more limited, one of the challenges we see is people will spin up kind of too many things. Like they'll start a members only thing and then they don't have the capacity to maintain that at a certain cadence. So you have to be smart about, making sure you can feed the animals you're going to adopt, before you do it. But the other thing that I think is really important there is thinking about feedback loops of engagement, not just sending the newsletter to subscribers, but how can you connect what you're doing in email to social, to in-person events, to the other things that you offer. Like one of the things we really like is when, as a strategy, is when you sort of ask for input on in the newsletter. You know, hit reply, tell us XYZ, what's your favorite one of these, or something like that, and then share the results out on social media, or collect information in an event that you can then share out in the newsletter as a content piece. There's a lot of interesting kind of closing the loop things that we think email can be a part of that puzzle, but especially with paid subscribers, you should be thinking about how to create that holistic experience of like, I am a member or a subscriber of this brand and this publication as a whole, right? Not just like I'm paying for this newsletter, because you can do that for sure, but it just makes it a little bit more transactional. And the stuff that seems to be most durable is when there's a slightly more elevated, more mission driven kind of connectivity there. So I think that's important. In terms of getting signups, the other thing I would just say is like, I don't think folks in general try enough different solutions or channels. Like it's a place where you should be throwing some spaghetti against the wall, right? If you're in a local market, like do not downplay the importance of being in person IRL to collect signups. It's like super old school, like go out with the table, the 10 by 10 tent and like get the table and like collect email addresses. But in my experience, and we see this with a number of our customers as well, those can be some of the best subscribers because they've like met you in person. It's just a totally different kind of connectivity, right? So that's a really important channel as well. And also partnerships. We've seen a lot of folks, and we've done this ourselves as well. A lot of folks grow effectively through partnering with other organizations in the local community or in their industry to share signups where you can put an opt-in, for example, on a page like, hey, you're going to this event. Do you also want to get this newsletter? Or doing call outs, that kind of thing can also help you find kind of related analogous folks. So thinking about those more proactive kind of street team like ways of grabbing subscribers is really important to counterbalance the signups you're getting on web traffic and that kind of thing, particularly as it looks like overall web traffic from search and these kind of channels may come down in the coming years due to these more recent Google changes and so forth.
Danny, what about revenue? I mean, are you monetizing those newsletters as best as you can? Is there an ad format or a certain way that it's making money for you?
Yeah, so we are selling ad placements using Letterhead's promotion feature. It's made it easier to provide advertiser content in the newsletter in a way that's clean, consistent, and quite manageable. That's helped us to offer newsletter advertising as part of our larger packages. There are programmatic ad options within Letterhead, but we're not currently using that feature. We're focused on the direct sales and using the promotions tool, as I mentioned. And that's really helped streamline and deliver those ads in our newsletters. So we're not quite where we want to be yet with this with that side of things, but we're happy that Letterhead's helping us grow that side of our business for sure.
Did I just hear, Chris, that there's an automatic way to make programmatic money in a newsletter through your interface? What is this that she's talking about?
There is. There is.
I didn't know that. I mean, maybe I missed that. Go ahead. What are you, in other words, if I can't sell local ads or can't get my sale, no, we all know what salespeople say. I got enough to sell. Don't throw something else at me. But you can actually monetize it through the programmatic world. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, you can. So we have partnerships with a number of programmatic providers who have email inventory, who have email demand, and they're always looking for more publishers to, supply with different kinds of advertising. They run a range. We have folks that are in the kind of super true programmatic space where you kind of never know exactly what you're going to get. The ads are personalized to each reader. The quality can vary a ton, right? And you have to dial in kind of what topics are we okay with and this kind of stuff. I'm sure some folks are familiar with that. But on the other end, there are kind of networks where different deals are being brought to you, like, hey, will you take ads from this particular partner or advertiser and this kind of thing. And so all of those are very low touch, where you can implement those with either kind of zero work, like fully automated, or very little work through our software. You do tend to need a certain volume of subscribers and email sends per month in order to make really interesting money, right? The CPM, the cost per thousand opens, like per email opens, on the programmatic can range anywhere from 50 cents. It can sometimes be below that, but we try to keep the floor at a certain level with the partners we work with, up to a few dollars. And so, you have to have a certain volume for that dollar figure to start to be interesting in programmatic. One thing we see, unfortunately, is
But
there are publishers
not to
who,
be interruptive, that's
yeah,
based
yeah,
on
please, please.
opens, not clicks, opens.
Based on opens, yeah. There are also programmatic that are based on cost per click. Um, those are tricky, right? Because
I would
we,
take 50 cents on 10,000 opens.
there you go.
I mean, that's what I get in one send. I did not, I mean, that's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick to me. I mean, you say, I mean, I don't know what you defined as interesting money. I mean, I think some people here do get thousands of opens, right? So you can monetize that. But how bad are these ads? Am I going to see ads for like get a Russian bride or something? I mean,
It varies a ton. I mean, we don't work with any of the there are certainly folks who are in the what I would say maybe lower quality ad space. I don't want to like denigrate the, like there's a place for that, but we don't touch that because we just don't think it works super well with email. It's a higher quality medium. But you'll see stuff that's like, it's homeowners tips and, interesting sales that are coming up and that kind of thing that's very consumery, right? You can usually edit that kind of stuff out of the ads you get over time with these partners because you can start to tell them, I do or don't want these topics, or I do or don't want, you can sort of feedback. And over some number of weeks or months, they'll dial in like what advertising is working best because these network partners that we have, they also want you to get as many clicks and engagement as possible because they're obviously making some money on that. We don't take a percentage of any of that revenue from these partners, like because our goal is really to be on your team as a publisher and to say, hey, which of these solutions do we think can work? And, how do we help you put together the most interesting program and whatever? And if we've got skin in the game, like making a cut, then we're incentivized to put you in, products that may not be a good fit. So we don't take a cut of that. But yeah, programmatic is complicated. And there are folks out there who get into a very, direct, like there are people who will be out there selling you their wares and they'll be like, oh, just put in my programmatic unit. You just make infinite money. And I think any of us who've been in this industry for a while know that when something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So what I would say broadly about monetization is it's a strategy that requires, like anything, some thought, and it's got to match the newsletter product that you are sending and the audience that you're sending it to. And if it feels connected and it feels like it works in that experience, it can be a really huge revenue driver. But if you're just kind of slamming random stuff in there to try to make a dollar, it almost never works. And of course, I don't think anybody on this call would be taking that kind of approach. But
no,
that's
because
just why we try to say product strategy first, and let's pick the right monetization products from there, and then start to model out, well, how much money can we make, and what does it take, and so forth. Because sometimes direct sales is the right option, and people shouldn't do programmatic. And sometimes the reverse is true. So it just really depends on the product and the audience.
all right, we're getting near the end of our journey again. Get into the chat room. We're going to be wrapping this thing up in just a few minutes. But let me go back to Danny. Danny, the billion-dollar question: how do you measure your success? I think it was Drucker who said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. What are you looking at? Opens, clicks, newsroom happiness, page views, or just what makes you happy when you look at your newsletter strategy? So other publishers on this webinar can use that as their litmus test. Go ahead.
For sure. It's a mix of engagement and revenue, and we've got a lot more intentional about tracking both. On the audience side, we're looking at open rates, click-through rates, and subscriber growth, especially by market. Are people opening our newsletter? Are they coming back? Are they sharing it? That tells us what we're delivering has value. On the business side, it's about whether our newsletters are supporting our sales goals. Are they helping close deals? Are we upselling packages? And are we providing ongoing value to our advertisers? And then finally, there's that operational win as well. Are we saving time? Is that process repeatable? Are we reducing errors and delays? Definitely, when those things are happening, we know we're building a channel that's sustainable, not just successful for this month, but it's going to be successful long term.
So everybody should be asking themselves the same question. Are you going to bed at night feeling that way? If not, look to a solution, maybe like Letterhead or another. But I hope you don't get mad at me for saying that, Chris, but got to improve. So with that being said, let's bring this whole thing home. Keep the chat going. Chris, how do you get started? What is the next step if someone is considering this? We heard Danny say this is affordable, but everybody's really tight now with budgets, as you know. So, Chris, bring it home. You got the microphone. Make your pitch to the audience. Tell them what it's like, how seamless, how easy is this, and what is your pricing model? We may ask. You don't have to give the exact number, but go ahead, sir.
No, I mean, look, our goal is basically to deliver 10x the value in the price you're already paying for a MailChimp or a Constant Contact or Campaign, whatever other products are out there. And it's not any particular shade against those products, but just, they may not be built for these kinds of use cases and questions and driving that revenue and engagement like we've been talking about. So our goal typically is to be right there, from a pricing perspective, that you're getting way more value out of that dollar that you're already spending. The way we typically think about it is, publishers are typically paying too much just to send the email out the door because email's been marked up historically, like the cost to actually get the thing out the door. That's pretty low cost. And so the value, the spend should really be on the strategy and the results and the ROI of how much time is it taking, what kind of revenue are you driving, what kind of open and click rates are you seeing. That's where our focus is. So way more value in scaling the channel at that same price point. That's how we typically try to do it. Our first step is always to do a consultation. The folks that are on our sales team are coming actually out of the media industry. They have a lot of experience with ad monetization and these kinds of things. And so the first interaction you would have with us is not a sales pitch or like let me show you Letterhead. It is, let me understand your business, where you're at today with the email channel. And we'll typically try to offer some insight or recommendations and so forth based on our experience, and try to figure out by the end of that, 15 to 30 minutes, can we actually be helpful to you or not? And, then does it make sense to dig a little deeper? But it always starts with that kind of consultation and that initial process, so that we can, one, offer you some value before you decide to engage with us, and really spend time. But number two, make sure we can actually be helpful. The key thing for us is ROI. We want people feeling like I'm getting way more value out of email, and not just out of the money you spend on Letterhead, but over the email channel as a whole than you were previously, or than you thought maybe was possible before. That's what we are aiming for. And so, if that's of interest, if you're thinking about how to get more value from an engagement or revenue perspective out of email, grab a little bit of time with us. I'll also drop my email in the chat as well. You see it there on the screen, but we'd love to connect and see if we can be helpful, and even just point you in the way of useful resources that might help you grow and scale what you're doing.
And you're platform agnostic, right? I mean, if people have whatever content management system they want, from a WordPress, knockoff, to one of the more sophisticated ones in our industry, like a Blocks Digital, Creative Circle Media, what have you. I mean, that's not a barrier, right? To get started into it.
No, we're not in the business of replacing your existing content management system or your existing CRM. So we're integrating with those products typically. So we have native integrations with a lot of the things on that list. And then if we don't, there's a number of methods we have to make that really easy. And we also do custom integrations quite frequently as well. So it's really easy for us to do that. The last thing we want to do is make teams that are already stretched for time have to learn a whole new thing or move all of the cheese for everybody. And so our onboarding process is to do as much of the work as humanly possible for you, so that all you have to do is, show up, learn the product a little bit, and let us help you get started. And we even do, for larger teams, we do team trainings and all this sort of stuff as well, so that all the folks across the organization can get familiar with the product, and we can handle a lot of that load that typically comes with adopting or changing a product, becomes internal pain. We try to take that on our side just to lower the lift there.
Danny, final advice to a publisher who is not making as much money, generating as much audience growth from their email strategy. Final piece of advice to our audience, Danny.
My advice is going to be build your system for sustainability and not just speed. It's really tempting to try and grow fast or push more content, but if the process behind that isn't efficient and repeatable, it's definitely not going to hold. So invest in the right tools, create a workflow your team can manage, and stay focused on what your audience truly wants. And that's where your long-term wins are going to come from. But before I wrap up, I just want to say it's a really exciting time for us at Info News. We've got some big plans in motion to expand our footprint in the coming months. And while we're proud of the local work we're doing in our current markets, we know there are other communities out there that could benefit from the same kind of high trust, community first reporting. So definitely stay tuned. There's more to come. And in the meantime, I'd love for you guys to follow along with our journey. You can check us out online, follow our team on LinkedIn or X, and most importantly, subscribe to one of our newsletters. It's the best way you guys can see what we're doing with Letterhead and maybe even spark a few ideas of your own. And I just want to say a big thank you to you, Mike and Chris, for having me on this webinar. It's been a real pleasure to be part of this conversation.
This has been a sponsored webinar, but we are very circumspect, Danny, about we get more requests for doing these than we allow because we got to make sure that we are putting, people call EMP sometimes the good housekeeping seal of approval, but what I'm saying is we're circumspect about who we feature, and we know Letterhead is a quality product who has been at many conferences. I understand you're going to be at the AAN, Chris, one of my favorite organizations. Did I see that going on in the chat?
We'll be at AAN, we'll be at ONA, we'll be at a lot of things through here. So if you're going, probably someone from our team will be there. We would love to connect as well. So
All right.
yeah, absolutely.
Chris, without a T, Stouffer, co-founder, CEO of Letterhead, an honor and pleasure. Again, you and of course your sidekick, Bruce Pinchbeck, has been in the chat room working diligently. You want to talk to Chris directly, Chris at tryletterhead.com. Book your demo at tryletterhead.com/EP. And of course, Danny, Danny, D-A-N-I, Hastings, VP Operations, Infotel Multimedia and Info News in British Columbia. We appreciate both your valuable time. Once again, all those who registered will get a link to this recording shortly. Please share it with your team, coworkers, or anyone else you think that may get benefit from this. Thanks all for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.